Rob Staten of Seahawks Draft Blog, and I obviously want to start with the offense for this one, a Week 2 win over the Steelers. Rob, after Week 1, you said, I felt like we were promised an offense and didn't quite get much of it against the San Francisco 49ers. Did you feel like you saw the offense fans were promised in Week 2?
I think we saw a lot more what we were expecting there, and the way that the yardage difference was, it was a little bit of a reverse of the San Francisco 49ers game. We saw Cooper Kupp involved. They had design plays for Elijah Arroyo. A.J. Barner's more heavily involved. It was great to see Ken Walker having a big game. I think it was a much more positive performance. Charles Cross was excellent at left tackle. Who could dislike the block that Oots put on those two linebackers? Fantastic. So, yeah, I thought there was a lot of positives there. And let's not forget the quarterback, Sam Darnold. You know, I think he had a really good game in this one.
I liked his bounce back. I like his resilience, right? You throw those 2 interceptions and you calm yourself down. You end up throwing 2 touchdowns. What did you see in the play calling that allowed him to bounce back? Did you see anything there?
There was more play action. They're playing more of the plays that I think we expected to see from this offense. And then I think it was just down to him. They opened things up. You know, they were attacking the middle of the field. The downfield shot to finish the game late on, that's the kind of play that you kind of want to see thrown in there. It can't all be the short stuff. It can't just be a series of screens and runs. So I really do think they opened things up. 2 really good touchdown throws from Sam Darnold. In particular, the first one, I know that Torrey Horton's wide open. He's still under pressure, Darnold there. I think he's kind of thrown off his back foot a little bit and still managed to get it to Horton. Really good tight window throw to Barner for his touchdown. And look, he may well have had 2 interceptions in this game. I don't think one of them was his fault. I was not sure on the play call that led to that second interception. And really, when you play action and you've got 2 defenders breathing down your neck, it's an awful position for the quarterback to be in. So, yeah, I think he played well despite those 2 interceptions. And at the end of the day, at least it was 2 interceptions and not 3.
Mike McDonald told reporters on Monday, we have to extend leads better. That's part of our emphasis as a football team and where we can grow. Now, you've got to be in a good place already as a team or feel confident if you're like, now what we want to do is make it a 14-point deficit. However, what's something that you'd like to see this team kind of build on in Week 3?
I just want to see them really working on that identity. I think they took a big step forward in this game, but it does feel as if there's a little bit more room for that. Really refine this offense now. We did see last season, defense started well for 3 games, then it kind of fell apart, and then they rebuilt things when they replaced the linebackers. I think the offense is probably going to go through a similar process here, that over time, you're gradually going to build on that. Certain players are going to become more impactful. Hopefully, this is just scratching the surface where you see Jackson Smith and Jigba have another really big game. Cooper Kupp really gets involved in the action. Maybe we're going to see a bit more from the Titans and Torrey Horton as we move along. It'd also be really great to see both running backs have maybe not a great game, because I think sort of Ken Walker had a great game on Sunday and Zach Charbonnet couldn't get a yard. The week before, Zach Charbonnet was good. Ken Walker could barely get a couple of yards. Is there a way to sort of make this a serious 2-headed monster, or is it always going to be this way that one plays well and then the other doesn't? But if they can work that out and they can really get things moving here, I think this defense is showing signs that it is going to be really good. Special teams has been good so far. If they can improve the offense, this can be a heck of a team.
There was a competition within the team during that game, and it was Riq Woolen and Josh Jobe. Right, who's going to outperform the other and make plays? And it seemed like both of them had pretty good games. How would you move forward with the DB situation if you were Coach McDonald?
I've been so impressed, as I'm sure everybody has, with Josh Jobe. The way that he has played in both games so far has been really impressive. I think he is deserving of more opportunities. That said, Riq Woolen received a lot of criticism the week before. You could barely notice him on the field. And I think that's to his credit. If you are not noticing a cornerback sometimes, they don't have to be making interceptions. If you're not noticing him, if they're not picking on him, if he's not giving up plays, he is doing his job. And I think that was a really good bounce back. So maybe one thing they can do is they can be a bit more creative with Devin Witherspoon when he's back to full health. They can move him inside and play Jobe and Woolen. But Jobe has definitely deserved more reps. And if it has to be one or the other, if Jobe continues on this trajectory in a couple of weeks' time, he might be the guy who you just can't leave off the field.
I wish I could just kind of like fast forward and see how Klint Kubiak kind of develops as a play caller this year. Already, I think the only thing I'm kind of confident in is he's a better fit than Ryan Grubb. And other than that, I'm kind of waiting to see. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't like scrolling through the Saints subreddit to find out like what were people saying about Klint Kubiak? What are they saying heading into this one? And it was just such a mixed bag. What have you liked so far, just big picture with Klint? And what's maybe a question you still have about him? Because I think finding that play caller is so central to becoming a Super Bowl team again.
Well, the two main things that I liked about him was that it was very clear on what he wanted to do. There was great clarity on what type of offense this was going to be. I think at times in Seattle, it's been a bit of a mixed bag. And even when you've maybe had offensive coordinators who've had the same, maybe Pete Carroll wants to have his say as well, and he kind of wants to dictate things a little bit. Last year, I just don't think there was any real idea as to what Ryan Grubb wanted to do. It was a bit of a fish out of water situation. Now they've moved to a coordinator who does know what he wants to do, and he's got the coaches to install that. And then the other thing was the experience of his staff, immensely experienced coaching staff there, who you would imagine are going to work with these players and develop. The one thing, as I said, the one thing that really needs to me is just to refine everything. It's to get to a point where you feel like the turnovers are going to come down. They've had too many turnovers in the first two games. They're going to sort of know if they want to be a great. Mike McDonald said this after the game. If you want to be a great outside zone team, you've got to be able to do it. And if they can't hang the hat on that, then they're not going to be anything this year. So we want to see more outside zone runs. I want to see more of those big runs that we saw at the weekend on Sunday, where Ken Walker's breaking through the first tackle and then it's away. And it's not just a 5-6 yard run. It can become a 20-yard and explosive run. I think that's what we want to see. But they're going to play some opponents coming up in the next few weeks that I think will give them an opportunity to get to that place.
I think they should be willing to adjust if it doesn't work. And I think that's what we saw with the Steelers, right? They tried the outside zone in the toss. It wasn't working, so they went more inside zone. And I'm wondering if they're going to – how stubborn they will be with that wide zone. Is there a point in the season where if it's just not working, you can it, or do you keep showing defenses that run to set everything up?
I think you have to have a degree of flexibility, but you also have to have a core identity. If you don't really know what you want to do in a given game, then it can be a little bit haphazard. And really, the main point of any quality team is this is who we are. This is what we're going to do. You cannot stop it. I don't think the better teams kind of just go, we're going to throw 100 different things your way. Now, some teams, we saw that with the Detroit Lions under Ben Johnson, and we saw it again at the weekend when they hammered Ben Johnson's Bears, is that they are going to throw, their sort of identity is that we do a lot of different things and we're going to attack you in lots of different areas, and they've got the playmakers to be able to do that. I don't know if Seattle quite have the assortment of weapons that the Lions have. So I think right now, as a new coordinator in year one, as this sort of develops, it is, okay, let's refine what we want to be. Let's make teams know what we're going to do, how we're going to attack them, but we're just going to be better than them. And if they can do that, you can build off that, you can expand things, you can be more creative. But first and foremost, you've got to get your core identity right. And I think that's what they will work on.
Very big picture question, but how can they build that up? You mentioned, I don't know that they've been able to stack up the talent that Detroit has. That's in part because, as you know, right, you're a draft expert. As you know, the Lions have been able to stack up those early picks. I think one thing Brian Schneider, one thing John Schneider's always lamented is we haven't gotten to pick number 2 overall and get Nick Bosa. We haven't had to pick number 4 overall. And yes, they have had 5 overall to get Devin. But, I mean, how can you simultaneously build up from, getting 10 wins last year and also find that talent? I know that's a big picture question, but maybe no one better to ask.
Well, increasingly, I think you've got to look at the veteran market. And if you look at teams who have won Super Bowls or competed for Super Bowls recently in the NFC, increasingly savvy trades, sometimes during the season, have enabled teams to get there. The Niners going and trading for Christian McCaffrey is a good example. Trent Williams was a great trade for the 49ers. The Eagles are experts at this. They will go and add talent during the season, and it will improve their team and it will fix certain areas. And we've seen it with the Seahawks. There's no LOB era without the Marshawn Lynch trade, which happened about a month into the season. I think they've got to keep their eye out. They've got to see what opportunities are out there. There are going to be teams in the coming weeks, Miami's a good example of this, who may just think this is over. We're going to have to rebuild here. We're going to have to move on. And, are there going to be some offensive players or even an edge rusher who you can go and acquire? And that has significantly impacted this. The defense doesn't get to where it gets to without him coming in. And let's go even a step further. Leonard Williams, that is looking like one of the best in-season trades that any team has made in recent years. Can you tell me a better defensive tackle pass rusher right now than Leonard Williams in the league? People might say, what about Jalen Carter? He's a highlights player. He has sort of 4 or 5 great players when he's actually on the field, by the way, 4 or 5 great plays, which you can put in a great highlight video. Williams is consistent. He is destructive. He's just sort of lifting the entire team. When you put him alongside an underrated Jarran Reed, you put him alongside a developing Byron Murphy, as a trio, they're a tour de force at the moment. So that's the kind of example when you get a really clever, intelligent in-season trade, you can elevate your team to the next level. Maybe that's what they're open-minded about doing here.